Hello, my name is Sean, and I'm here with my mother, Marlene. I'd like to share with all of us an experience that happened to her in November 1994, about 17 and a half years ago. This event profoundly changed her outlook on life, health, and diet. I have some questions that I would like to ask you, Mother.
Sure, be happy.
Thanks. The event that I'm referring to is the bout that she had with cancer. And the first question that I have for you is, how did you discover you had colon cancer, and what were the symptoms?
Good question. I discovered cancer about 9 months after I'd had a barium enema. That procedure was said to have been clear, so there were no problems. I continued having colon issues though, and because my history since I was a child, I had constant constipation and other bowel issues that just kind of flared up and off all throughout my life. So, plus I had a history. My mother had had colon cancer, and my father's mother, Grandma Lucy, had colon cancer and eventually a colostomy as well. So I went back to the doctor and told her I was still having these issues and other colon issues as well. And so she said, well, it's time to do a colonoscopy. And she wanted to do it like within a week. Now, it was in October, and Tammy was getting ready for a wedding. Scott was due home for a church mission at the same time. You were like 7, 8 years old, and I had 3 other boys to take care of. We just moved in, and we're kind of in the settling issues with our new home. Plus, I was going to college, so I had a really busy plate. So I told the doctor, let me just get through this wedding, and then we'll do it. So that's exactly what they did. When I finally did go in and have a colonoscopy, they said they found a tumor, and they wanted me to immediately go up and speak to a surgeon, which I did. But at the time, I still had no idea that I had cancer. I didn't even learn that until about 2 days later. I just thought I had a tumor, and they wanted to remove it. I decided to get a second opinion, and so someone recommended Dr. Christensen, who eventually became my surgeon. So a week after the wedding, about the first week, the 3rd of November 1994, after doing all the required appointment and paperwork, etc., I went in for surgery.
Right. And to my understanding, your parents came to support and give you and your family assistance. What were the days like before surgery, and then the few days and weeks afterwards?
The days before were really challenging. They put me on a 5-day special diet so that I would gradually go down to just 2 days of straight liquids. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part for me would probably be when they had given me 3 or 4 different prescriptions for antibiotics to cover any problems. And I was to do that the day before. They were so strong and so intense that I was so sick all day before surgery, just constantly vomiting. I could hardly get my breath, and I was just throwing up to the point where it's just vile because I had no food in me, and what liquid I had I would throw up. I remember Mom being really upset and concerned, and so she called a doctor who said it pretty much has to run its course and just give her ice chips. I think I didn't really find comfort until my father had given me what we know as a father's blessing, and I shortly after started to feel better, and I think it was probably well after midnight before I could calm down. And I had to be up at 3:30 in the morning. We had to be to the hospital at 5, so I had very little sleep that night. I checked into the hospital. My parents and my husband went to the recovery waiting room, and then I went and had surgery. They originally said that they would resect my colon and that it was carcinoma of the colon, and then I would just be fine. Go home, everything would be great. But when I returned to my room, my family was there and the doctor, and they had some really disappointing news that the cancer had seeded through the lining of the colon, and several lymph nodes were now malignant. Now they re-diagnosed it, and it was called, and it's a mouthful, it's called high-grade non-Hodgkin's lymphoma within the terminal ileum, cecum, and ascending colon. Quite a mouthful.
Right.
I was really dumbfounded and thought, my gosh, how could this be happening? By the end of the day, I had an oncologist sitting by my bed who wanted to have a CAT scan, and I still had tubes in me and was in extreme amount of pain, and there was just no way I could get off that bed. So we did it the next day. He was already saying at that time, you will probably need chemotherapy. And I remember thinking, I just couldn't wrap this around my brain. It was just so overwhelming. I suggested that we see another oncologist, which we did. 2 weeks later, we went in and saw Dr. Allison. She did a bone marrow test, and it came back clear, which was good. She counseled with her colleagues there in her office, and they came back, and much to our surprise, we were told that I would need approximately a year of chemo, ranging from injections and the intravenous, and then the last few months would be oral pills. Anyway, by now I am pretty well just so overwhelmed. I just not sure what I should do. But I'm listening to my father, and he is telling me, you know, read this, and I brought this book on the SEAC report, and let's try shark cartilage, and let's do all these other things. And so I'm finding a little comfort from him. He recommended Dr. Fuller Royal in Las Vegas, and so he was their doctor, and so I went to see him, and he had a whole regimen of things that I was doing. I also was introduced to Angela Harris, who shared with me her story about her battle with cancer and how she overcame it with herbs. And she had a long history of family, grandmother and mother, who all knew about herbs, and so it was well ingrained in her upbringing. I spent many hours researching and praying, and on the phone too. I kept putting the doctors off. By now my surgeon is suggesting that I go into LA. There's a big famous hospital. The name is beside me right now. And then he also recommended later that I go to the University of Utah because they had a really good cancer department. He knew that I was really hesitant, and even though he and friends and family were all recommending you just have to do chemo, there was something about this that I could not engage in. Mm-hmm. One day my doctor was to take my records to the tumor board, where they would meet with doctors around a table and discuss my case. Well, on this particular day, only one doctor showed up, and she's an oncologist, Dr. Allen, and she was like, I'm not sure that this is really the best thing, all this chemo, because it hadn't showed up in other organs. And so I was like, oh my gosh, finally someone is seeing things a different way. Yeah. So anyway, a few days later, he called me back to say that she now concurred with her colleagues who were saying, well, we just want to give her some chemo anyway, maybe not as intense as that, but we still recommend it. Well, by now I've made plans to go to Orem, Utah, and I'm going to have Thanksgiving with the family. And while I'm there, I'm going to visit with a man, Mel Gish. And he was going through cancer, and he had wonderful things to say and suggest to me. So we spent several hours with him. He received radiation, though, and all these things, and at the last hour was trying to correct and do other things. But soon after our visit, he did lose his battle to cancer.
That's right. So after all of that, you kind of decided, and you found out that you had this whole new challenge on your hands.
Yeah.
And I can remember you talking about a couple that you had worked with, John and his husband Lorraine, and that they really kind of helped you the most get through a lot of this. And they had a specific machine that they used called the SC5 machine,
right.
Or also known as the Subtle Energy 5th Edition machine, and that this machine helped to identify subtle energy frequencies like our aura, that surrounds the physical body and registers and identifies imbalances and areas within our body. Is that correct?
That's right.
Right. So tell me a little bit about that experience and how you met them and how long did you receive their help?
Well, the gentleman, Mel Gish, who passed away, recommended that I call Fred and Rhea, who had a little herb shop in Idaho, Rhea's Herbs. And there they introduced me to John, and they also had me buy some other herb products, Easiac, which is really powerful and good for cancer and other immune system things. So what's really funny about all this is he lived just shortly by our house, so it was like everything's coming back full circle, right back to where we lived. But John and Lorraine were wonderful. They just walked me through and tested me, and he was a little hesitant at first because he wasn't a doctor, but just this humble man who really had helped hundreds of people, literally hundreds of people. He has since passed away, and I stayed kind of gradually weaning myself off of him for about the first 2 years.
Absolutely. So I guess the question today is how you're doing now. How are you doing now, and what did the doctor say then, and what do they say today, and about how you're doing and things like that.
Yeah, well, I feel like I'm doing really well. I've had several colonoscopies over the years, and they all came out really good. I've made changes to my diet, and I've sought out mostly alternative doctors over allopathic or traditional doctors, because it's been my experience that they generally are trained in what I would term temporary fixes,
right.
surgery or drugs or whatever, rather than finding the real root cause and get to the bottom of things and then do things that are less invasive and harmful to your body.
Right.
I remember after I was told I was in remission, the doctor were always saying, "Oh, you're doing great, keep up what you're doing," but they never wanted to know what I was doing because it would be so contrary to what they had been taught in medical school. So, I never tried to push what I was doing, just kept doing what I was doing.
Right.
Anyway, I think I'm doing great.
Right. Well, you look great,
Thank
and
you.
so and I appreciate that. I guess in conclusion, if there was one last question that I would like to know, and that I think a lot of people would like to know, is if you could go back and relive that experience, what things would you do differently?
Good question. And I've thought about this often. If I had to go back, I guess what I would do is, number one, I would deal with stress differently. I would learn to communicate a little more openly and not hold things in. I would also find time for Marlene and do things that I look forward to doing, which really could be very difficult because we had a large family and we're on a restricted budget. But I would also maybe go back and improve my diet. I would eat more fiber, eat less meat. I would juice more. I would learn more about green smoothies. I would exercise more. I would eliminate a mucus-causing dairy diet. I would increase the beans and legumes and nuts. And I would do more fresh vegetables and fresh fruits and things like that. Never would I ever have, if I knew then what I know now, I would never ever touch pop. It's just horrible. And we didn't do a lot of it anyway.
Right. No, we didn't. That's for sure.
And I would have paid attention to avoiding white sugar and white flours, which are really empty. Also, I would let go of offenses that harm and not heal. I would laugh more and worry less about the little things. I would say, "I love you" more often, and "I'm sorry," even if it's I who felt offended.
Right.
I really feel, though, that this experience, I just couldn't repeat it. I'm grateful that Heavenly Father gave me this trial because it's taught me so much, and I have learned and met immense, wonderful people through this experience. And I'll just say what's interesting here, I'll point out that years later, I went back to my mother-in-law's home when they had passed away and went to her journal and just wanted to see what she had written, if anything. And I remember reading that she said the doctor said Marlene would live only 6 months maximum if she did not do the chemo. Well, really, the truth is the reverse was the reality. And I feel so blessed to look back and knock on wood. I've learned that there's more than one way to skin a cat, and it's such a personal choice. So what I did, I can share with other people, but I feel that it's a private, personal choice.
Right.
But I also feel that our personal trials help mold us and our characters become stronger if we allow them to.
Right. That's exactly. And, just in conclusion, I would just express my feelings of gratitude. Having lived and seen it at a young age, and seen a drastic change in the family environment and the way that we ate and the way that we just specifically lived when it came to matters of nutrition, that I think that I benefited the most. I was the one that was taught the most and given the opportunities to stay away from fast food and from soda and to really benefit from your knowledge. And it's been a tremendous blessing in my life. And I just say thank you to that. That if it wasn't for that knowledge and for really this experience, I wouldn't be where I am today. And so the experience that you went through has blessed my life. And so you can just see this trickle effect of how this one experience in your life has not only blessed my life and the life of your children, but your grandchildren and your future grandchildren, and how they're going to be blessed from it because of the way that you dealt with this situation and that you took an inspired way to really put your cancer in remission, and it's been a huge blessing in my life, and I just say thank you to that, and for you really making the best of this experience. So
Well, you're welcome.
thanks. I love you,
Thank
Mom.
you. Love you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
You're
We
welcome.
appreciate it. Thank you.